Upon this rock, May 2nd, 1676, was made the agreement for the ransom of Mrs. Mary Rowlandson of Lancaster between the Indians and John Hoare of Concord. King Philip was with the Indians, but refused his consent. Hello, and welcome to Redemption Rock. If I told you guys how many times I've tried to make this video for you, you would laugh at me. And something just came to me that this is not going to be perfect. And I am not, from the History Channel or something. I'm just a nerd with a camera who likes history. So we're going to give it one more shot. And this is going to be it. So it's going to get posted. If you're new to the channel, thank you for clicking. And if you've been here before, I appreciate your support. I am 2 days away from leaving my hometown en route for the Appalachian Trail, planning a Nobo northbound hike starting in about a week. And I have until August 29th, which is when I start grad school. So kind of a tight window, but we're just gonna roll with it. And if I absolutely have to push off grad school, then that's what I'm gonna do. Because this is my number one priority right now in life, is to complete the Appalachian Trail. So that's what we're gonna do. As part of my introduction for the Appalachian, I want to share with you the story of Redemption Rock. And I picked this place in particular because it's somewhere that has been important to me throughout my adult life. A lot of times when I was home on leave, I would come and visit this place, and I knew it was some place that I could just come and sit and relax and think about things. And then on the other side, the history nerd in me would visualize or try to think about the events that took place here, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. See, the rock is behind me. It sits at a decent elevation. And when I've been here in the past, I've thought about, who would have controlled the high ground. In my mind's eye, it was the Native Americans that got here first, because they had Mary in captivity and able to control what was going on. But who knows? I have no proof of that, and I don't think she covers it in her memoir. So they'll have to remain a mystery. Unless somebody knows, and then put it in the comments, please. So to understand the story of Mary Rowlandson, you probably have to go back to 1620 when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. The first people that they came across was the Wampanoag Indian tribe. And from 1616 to 1619, they suffered a huge tragic loss of life due to what historians thought for a long time was, I forget now. Anyways, it wasn't what they thought it was, but it did wipe out a lot of the tribe members. And living next to them was the Narragansett tribe, who was still hugely populated and powerful. Massasoit, who was the leader of the Wampanoag Indian tribe, made friends with the settlers at Plymouth and ended up forging an alliance with them. And this was important for them, for both parties actually, because of the Narragansett tribe that was so powerful living in this area. That alliance held true for most of Massasoit's life, actually all of his life. He died in 1661, and his eldest son, Wampsuta, took control of the tribe. In 1662, the English believed that Wampsuta was plotting an attack against the English colony, and they went and grabbed him and brought him by gunpoint back to Plymouth Bay Colony for questioning. During his time with them, he swore an allegiance to England, and he was released. Unfortunately for him, He also contracted a disease while he was in camp and died on his way home. So the next in line was Metacom, or Metacomet, sometimes you'll hear him referred to as, or Philip, which was his English given name. Watsuma also had an English given name. It was Alexander. So now Philip's in charge, or Metacom. This is 1662. Things were, besides the fact that he was upset and suspected that the English poisoned his brother, things were relatively peaceful. He did try to lead his people through peace and established and maintained the established treaties with the English. He would even go into the city of Boston and buy some clothing from the English, from what I've read online. This relationship went on until about 1671. Philip, or Metacom, was going to conduct an attack on their village. So what they did was they made him and his people turn in all their arms and ammunition. They ended up turning in the majority of it. And this kind of frictionish, I think I just made those up. This relationship went on until 1675, when a praying Indian by the name of John Sassamone, I believe, if memory serves me right, went to the Plymouth colony and warned them that King Philip was planning an attack on them. The colony didn't believe him, and on his way home, 3 Wampanoag Indians jumped him, killed him, and dumped his body into an icy pond. There was a witness for the crime, and the English went and gathered up those 3 men, the 3 Wampanoag Indians, and jailed them, tried them by an all-English jury, sentenced them to death, and killed them. So this obviously sent King Philip into a rage and pretty much sparked the King Philip's War. Or it's also sometimes known as the Great Narragansett War or the First Indian Wars, all talking about the same thing. Okay, as for Redemption Rock and why it's important, obviously happened during the King Philip War and affected Mary Rowlandson and her 3 children, who were living in Lancaster, Massachusetts, on February 10th, 1675, when their town was raided by about 400 Nipmuc warriors and destroyed the town, killed about 50 people, and took 24 captive, to include Mary and her 3 children. Her husband, the first minister of Lancaster, was in Boston at the time, so he wasn't there to get taken or killed or whatever. So for Mary's part, she spent about 12 weeks moving with the tribes. She was sold to I can't remember which tribe, but she was sold to somebody else. His name was Quinnipiac, and she stayed with him and his family for the majority of her time in captivity. She was able to better her position a little bit because she was experienced in knitting and sewing, and would sew or knit the tribe members' socks or shirts, and sometimes even got paid for it, maybe a shilling. Sometimes she got some food, and one time she even got a knife, which her captive, Quinnipiac, took from her or his wife, I'm not sure which. During her time in captivity, she lost her eldest daughter, Sarah, who was injured during the attack, and also Mary was shot through the side during the attack on her village on Lancaster, Massachusetts. She recovered. Unfortunately, Sarah didn't. She died, I think, about 9 days into captivity. She did come across her 2 other children during her time in captivity as well. Even though they were moving quite a bit, she details in her journal remove 1 through remove 20, and it's her moving throughout southern New England, west all the way to Connecticut River, and as far south as southern New Hampshire, although I don't know exactly how far she went. Living on berries, nuts, roots, she says skunks, horse intestines, all types of stuff that was the only food available to them at the time. Thankfully for her, she was released with the help of some Boston gentlewomen and John Orr, as we saw on the sign, for the price of 20 shillings, 2 coats, a half bushel of feed corn, and some tobacco. So she was released here on this rock and went back to her life. Her 2 children, her 2 surviving children, were eventually, she's reunited with them, Unfortunately, her husband died about 2 years later, and that's when she wrote her memoir that was printed in both Boston and in London. As for King Philip, his fate wasn't as kind. He was killed by another man, another praying Indian by the name of John Elderman, at his base of camp, his base of operations on Mount Hope in Rhode Island. So not only was he shot, he was then taken back to Plymouth, he was hung, he was decapitated, and then drawn and quartered. John Alderman was given his right hand as a trophy, and his head rested on a pike for 2 decades in Plymouth Colony. This war is the most costly war by means of blood and treasure in U.S. history per capita. Hundreds of colonists were killed. Dozens of communities, both on the English and Indian sides, were destroyed. Thousands of Native Americans were killed, wounded, or sold into slavery. And the Narragansett and the Wampanoag Indian tribes were damn near wiped out. Also, King Philip's wife and son were sold into slavery as well. So, this is the site of Mary Rowlandson's release. There's a memoir that you can read. It's also available online, so you don't have to buy it and just do a Google search for it. This site is located in Princeton, Massachusetts, off of Route 140. Highly encourage you to come check it out. It also sits on the Massachusetts Mid-State Trail, so you can get some hiking in as well. All right, thank you again for tuning in. This is Thomas Stevens, hiking, history, and adventures. And this is the kind of content that I'll be bringing while I'm hiking the Appalachian Trail starting next week. So hope to see you then.